Welcome to another installment of the Badass Entrepreneurs Club. Today, our guest is Dr. Guy Levy, who has had, yes, he's a dentist, but he has had an entrepreneurial journey way outside of dentistry. And so I'm super excited to have you on the show today, Guy. Welcome.
Thank you, Angela. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So now when people think about dentists being entrepreneurs, they think about the traditional path of, you know what, you're going to buy a practice, you're going to work in it, and then you're going to sell it and maybe be an associate and then exit. That's not really what you've done with your career, is it?
It is not.
And that's a beautiful thing. I feel like you have taken knowledge, whether you have or not, from other entrepreneurial enterprises and brought it in and leveraged it in your dental career. And you haven't had the easiest path either. So I'd like you to give us a little bit of insight into what made you decide to be an entrepreneur, dental clinic wise and beyond.
You know, it's interesting. I don't think most of us dentists think of ourselves as entrepreneurs. And you know, it's absolutely what we are. I was very fortunate to join my father in practice and practiced with him for 20 years before he retired, bought the practice from him. Early on in my dental career, I realized I had no business experience. And I think a lot of dentists are like that. I had, not everybody, but I was like all science. I condensed my science education to an extent that I graduated in 3 years from college and from dental school. And so I really wanted to get more of an understanding of what business was, because I figured that might be important in owning and managing a practice. And so I went back to school. I got a master's in health administration, which was really revealing for me. And I loved it. I loved all the case stories that we learned and the law and the accounting. And I came back. It's so funny because I wanted to implement everything immediately. And my mother was the office manager and my dad, and they were like, no. So I had to stretch my entrepreneurial muscles beyond the practice in some aspects. But in the mid 90s, I was, and this is just curiosity. It had nothing to do with wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to be wealthy or anything like that. I had a number of patients, it just seemed like over a few months, who were older and had rampant caries because of dry mouth. And the products on the market at that time were so awful. I called them liquid rubies. I mean, they were just like, I couldn't get anyone to be compliant with it because they put it in their mouth. They couldn't. It feels like, whoa. It's like rubbing Vaseline in your mouth.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't have, now we've got silver diamine fluoride, which is awesome. I get people in, just slap it all over the place and do our best. But so I thought there has to be something better. And so I did some research. And I wrote a white paper, and I called one of our patients who had become the director of a research park at Virginia Tech, where I went to college. And he said, we've got this new polymer lab here. And because I was telling him what I was interested in. So I ended up developing a relationship and basically contracting. I paid for this new polymer lab. And we spent about a year and a half together, and I drive. It was about 5 hours once a month, and I drive there. We spend the day. I'm not a polymer scientist. I was like a project manager, and we talk about what I wanted to achieve. And I had this whole list. I had my paper. I asked them read it again, and I'd give them new papers, and I'd say, "Here's other things I think we can do anyway." And after about a year and a half, I was kind of depressed because I'd spent $25,000, which is at the time felt like everything we had. It was our college fund for our kids. Like, what am I doing? And my wife, who's a saint, she's like, "Guy, just do what you're gonna do." So, but I'd spend the day, and then I would come back, and then they would mail what we did that day. They'd finish it up and mail it to me, and I'd try it. So I'd take a bunch of antihistamines and dry myself up, and I'd put it in my mouth, and I'd try it. Sometimes I think that may have been dangerous, but anyway.
You're looking at yourself.
I was almost at the edge of like, this isn't going to work. What am I doing? I wasn't thinking about markets, nothing. I was just thinking about, I want to solve this problem.
Right.
And so after about a year and a half, they sent me our last project where we made these polymer lollipops. It's a unique hydrogel that we ended up patenting. And it was on like a metal stick, and I cut the stick, and I stuck it in I dried myself up, I stuck it in my mouth, and I woke up in the morning. We soaked it in some mouthwash. I woke up in the morning, I told my wife, Robin, I said, that was the most amazing night's sleep. That was unbelievable. This feels so good. It's amazing. So I took the others I had, and they're in my neighborhood. There are a couple of patients who had terrible dry mouth. One was a head and neck cancer patient. One was his medications for heart and diabetes and everything else. And so I took it over to them, and they tried it, and they were like, that's amazing. That is amazing. So I was like, okay, we're on to something. So go through the whole patent. I still hadn't really conceptualized, like, is there a market for this? I just figured I solved a problem. This is great. I hadn't thought about, like, what's it going to take to manufacture this? Right. All of those jarring questions jarring answers came later. And we were issued a patent, and everyone's like, you've got a patent. You must be rich. And you have no idea. A patent is worth less than the paper that it's printed on. And if you want to try to sell technology, good luck. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I was introduced to people who were like the international vice president for new products for Procter & Gamble, for Colgate, all these companies. And I'd go meet with them, and I had my friend locally who I met in the JCs, who's a lawyer. I got him involved, and I said, we'll be partners in this. And he agreed. And everyone, they were like, yeah, this is great, but you know what? We've got so much technology that we already own, that we've created, that we're not using. We're not buying anyone else's. And what I realized is markets have value. Like if you sell your dental practice, they really don't value all of, you love your piezo whatever, and you love your 3D scanner and your crown mill. They don't value that. They value the patients you have and the revenue that you create with those patients. And if you don't create much revenue, they don't value the patients, just the revenue.
Right.
So if you don't have a market, they're like, yeah, if you happen to have like the magic key that fits into their problem, you're made. I mean, you've got some value, but otherwise that doesn't happen very often. And I'll never forget. Virginia Tech was trying to help me some, and so one of the alumni had been the president of Letterly Pharmaceuticals, which became part of American Home Products, and ultimately I think part of Pfizer. And but he is a great person, gracious, and he and his wife invited me, and I came, and I had my polymer in Tupperware, and I sat down when they fed me lunch in their house, and he's looking at it, and he's like, let me tell you something. He said, we used to have new product meetings once a month, and people would bring products then that were packaged that were amazing. And you thought to yourself, how could the world go on without this product? And here I'm sitting here with my Tupperware. Right. And
I can just see it. Got this. This is your like magic product that's going to change the world in your Tupperware container.
So he said, and you know what? Almost all of those products to this day have never been on the market. Like the product that I thought that everyone thought, the world exists without this. The world exists without it. So one of the great things about this polymer was that it would differentially either collect or release moisture or liquids in a very.
So did it stay in your mouth so that it could do this?
It doesn't stick to anything. It's so non-stick. It's so slippery. But if your mouth is dry, it'll release whatever fluid you put into it. If your mouth is wet, it'll soak it up. So it's really interesting, and it's differential. So if the perimeter is dry, it'll deliver moisture there. But if the middle, the core is wet, it'll soak that up. It's just fascinating. It's pure luck. I mean, I didn't intend to do that, but the properties just happen to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met some of the scientists at NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, used to be the Bureau of Standards, which has a very interesting relationship with dentistry because it's the only public-private partnership that exists in the whole government realm. And so it's the American Dental Association is a third responsible, the government's a third responsible, and the private industry is a third responsible. So it's this collaborative. And out of NIST, high-speed drills, composites, I mean, all the things we use came from there. It's an amazing think tank. And when you drive onto the campus, it's like a college campus, there's this big sign that says, there are more Nobel laureates on this campus than anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. It's like, and the scientists never leave. Like the guy who invented the high speed, when I was there, he was still there. He's been retired for a long time. He doesn't get paid, but he still comes back. He's still got his desk on Bowen. And the guy who did composite, he was still there. I mean, it's like these people are so excited and passionate about what they do. So anyway, but there is a doctor, his name was Dr. Tung, which I thought was kind of funny, but he had developed something called amorphous calcium phosphate, which is now very popular. It's in enamel on toothpaste, and it's in surgery products, grafting products for bone grafting. But anyway, he was behind that, but he loved it because in the mouth, it would help facilitate the release of fluoride and protecting the teeth. And but he said, I need your polymer. I met him at the Chicago Midwinter meeting. So I went and visited them. And so I spent a lot of time with those guys, kind of refining what I wanted to do. And the director, he said, you really ought to look into wound care. He said, I used to be in charge, because they put dentists in charge of health things with the military a lot, because I guess dentists are organized or something. So the dentist who is the director of the institute there, he said, in the Navy, we had people who injured themselves all the time with burns. And he said, this powder would be awesome because it doesn't stick to the skin, and it would not macerate the skin. Okay. So we had tested, so you could put it on your skin, leave it there for a week and take it off. And usually when you take a Band-Aid off, it's like it's all mush. Your skin looks beautiful. It's like regenerated. So also at that meeting, I met a lot of the drug companies were consolidating, and there used to be a drug company called Block Drug that made a lot of dental things. And so this guy was awesome, and so I actually hired him as a consultant, because I'm big into hiring consultants for my dental practice, for anything I do, because I realize I don't know a lot. And so he was in between. He actually became a turnaround guy, and he's really bright. So we went and visited him while he's firing a bunch of people in northern New Jersey for the company that had brought him in to turn it around. And he said, let me give you a quick understanding of this market. He said, I've marketed a lot of products in the dental consumer market. And basically by the time he was done, he was like, no one's going to invest in a dental product, in one product. Maybe if you've got a whole portfolio of them, oh, wow. No one's going to invest in one product because it's going to be more expensive for you to manufacture, blah, blah, blah. He said, whatever you're going to make in dentistry, multiply it by 10 for or more for the medical market. So that's when we switched from dental to wound care. And so we had a lot of good interactions with our local medical school, with my college, and introducing us to people. Veterinarians loved it. They use it because it didn't stick to the pets.
Right.
But our real turnaround came when the local medical school had one of their esteemed physicians and professors had a ulcerative condition that was debilitating. and he had these wounds that wouldn't heal. He was taking a lot of morphine to control the pain. And they said, we need your, and the board member at the medical school was the immediate past medical director for J&J for their wound division. And so he said, just give me what you got. We said, well, it's not sterile. He said, I don't care. So anyway, so we spent 4 days, and I had made a lab in the back of the dental office with a hood, and I could make the polymers. And because it's really expensive to get someone else to make stuff for you, just in case anyone's interested in contract manufacturing, really expensive.
Right.
So I made everything. And so we made some, and a month later, the nurse calls us and said, I don't know what that is, but it's amazing. And the doctors, he's not on morphine. He can live his life to the best he can. It didn't solve his condition, but it made it a lot more palatable for him to survive. So we got introduced to J&J and some other companies. Still, that same issue of, yeah, where's your market? Like, you sell some of this, then we'll come talk to you.
Right.
So we ended up building a clean room. We actually collaborated. So my business partner had been the president of the local board of ARC, which is the Association for Retarded Citizens. They've changed the name now because that's not politically good. But so we hired people who were mentally and physically disabled to be our workforce. It was awesome. They were amazing. The advantage of that, and if anyone's getting into doing something like that, is you have to plan everything down to the very most specific task. And when you do that, they do it precisely, but it's got to be one task. So it forces you to create a protocol for manufacturing or whatever you're doing that's very specific. And they would have managers manage them, but it was a great relationship. And that's a whole nother story I could tell. It was one of the best things I've ever done, and seeing the impact it had on these people, because they'd never really done anything like this, like put on a whole clean room outfit. And they were amazing. And the interesting thing is they were harder on each other. Like if they saw someone else they thought wasn't following exactly the task that needed to be followed, they'd yell at each other. They held each other accountable. But anyway, but we built out a business, and we based it, interestingly, on a model that we found that the podiatrists do most of wound care, because it's
right.
mostly
diabetic foot care and stuff.
Right. And there's so many people with neuropathic wounds where they can't feel their foot, and they get ulcers that get huge. So, but we had this method that we had devised for, and this is understanding your market, which I was kind of learning as I was going. And there are a lot of bumps in this road. But anyway, we had a lot of help, and a lot of friends and family invested. So we raised $6 million from friends and family. And I'm from here. My business partner was with a prominent law firm, and he ended up quitting the law firm to run this. We had to decide, one of us had to do it, and he hated law, and I love dentistry, so he said, I'll quit. I mean, he didn't hate law, but he hated what he had to do to be a lawyer. So
right.
it was a grind. So so we raised the money, we built a clean room, we started manufacturing. But we were marketing direct to the podiatrists through a direct sales force as a durable medical equipment, DME manufacturer, which just about the time we launched, there was so much fraud in DME in big cities that the federal government shut down any new DMEs.
And you fell into that category?
Our market shrunk quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, and then we had to work through middlemen, suppliers, which cut our margin in half. And so we were very fortunate, though. Our board wanted to liquidate the company. Our CFO wanted to liquidate the company. And I'm just thinking about, I have raised, both of us, $6 million from friends and family. I cannot do that. And so if anyone is starting something, make sure in your contract, like in your operating agreement, that you're ultimately in charge. So at the end of the day, even though we had a board, even though we had a CFO, it was written in our contract that the ultimate decision came down to my business partner and me.
Right.
And we said, we're not doing that. We will find a way out of this, which led to a lot of heartache, but that was a huge lesson.
And how long did this go on for, from when you're like, oh, I need to solve this problem, to getting to the point where 6 million had been raised from friends and family, and you're at this point where they're telling you they're going to liquidate you?
So it was 10 years from the time I started till we raised money.
Wow.
And then that was about 3 years after we raised the money that it became evident that our market model wasn't going to work.
Right.
That the break even wasn't pretty. But one of the good things is never burn a bridge. So the guy who helped us with our first study. So we had a study that we did before we ever launched, and we did a comparative study with the only pharmaceutical product that was used for wound care, and we were as good as that product in this study. Which again, I paid for, right. Which wasn't cheap. But the guy who wrote the study, who we had to negotiate with, because he charged, anyway, make a long story short, he said, look, I'll work with you. And he's been the most awesome guy ever. His name is Dr. Adam Lansman. He's a surgeon, he's a scientist, PhD in something or other. And he said, look, he said, there's other things we can do. And so we had been introduced through the medical school. We had helped the doctor with his wounds where they loved us, introduced us to a company called LifeNet Health, which is our regional tissue bank. And they were having some problems with some of their testing, and they used our polymer, and they were like, this is great. And so the guy who ran our study, who became our medical director, said, if they can make a product for wounds that's a skin, an allograft, that has these properties, it needs to be this thick, it needs to have this, that, and the other. He said, I think we can market that. So we went to them, and so we co-marketed a product with LifeNet Health, so our initial product was Theragoz, which ultimately we just stopped selling because it just wasn't a good revenue model. And we started selling a skin graft called TheraSkin. And it's just hard when you have two products that kind of do similar things. One of them is retail, which you never get, $10, and one of them is $800. It's hard to tell your sales team, work on both of those.
Right.
So ultimately, it just became this, and the TheraSkin works great. But it's interesting, another nut for anyone doing something like this, if you have a contract with someone to co-develop or to market something, and I learned this from our CEO, who we brought in, who was retired from J&J. They train a lot of people. J&J is like a university for training people. So, but he said, you can give up everything, but never give up the brand. And so, interestingly enough, when you have a product that's marketed in healthcare, all of the approvals with insurance companies, because everything's about reimbursement. These aren't consumer products. These are products marketed to doctors, hospitals, clinics, a variety of places. It's attached to reimbursement, and that reimbursement approval is tied to the brand. Right. So you can have the same exact product, the same exact thing in a different label, and it's not approved. You can't get paid for it.
Right.
That's really important. It's like huge. I learned that. So fortunately, when we had some issues in transitioning, we had maintained ownership of the brand, and it allowed us to actually ultimately, when we started to do well and started to actually make money, it allowed us to merge into another company which happened in 2019. And it was really the brand that saved us and allowed us to do that.
Great. So from that point, from the start, now that's how many years into this?
About 20 years, 22 years.
Yeah. You have some staying power, my friend.
Yeah, persistence is important. We had a lot of times, oh my gosh, there was one time when we were marketing. So, you use logic doesn't always make good business sense.
Right.
And so it's always when you have a product that is being reimbursed, the insurance companies and the government with Medicare, Medicaid are always kind of trying to find how we can be more efficient, save money, or be more beneficial with the money that's spent. And so it's a moving target in how products are reimbursed. And so we said, okay, you know what, we have managed to hone our company. They call it the burn rate, like how much money it costs you to run your company. And so we always kept it very low. We didn't take much salary. No one did anything lavishly. Our salespeople, share a room. We're not paying for your alcohol. Very different from a lot of other companies. We had fun. And we had no ceiling. Like you could make as much as we said to all of our salespeople, we want you to make much more money than we make because we want them incentivized. It's all about incentives. It's all about, making people feel like they're part of it. We also had just like in my dental practice, we had a ownership program within the company, although it wasn't worth a lot at the time. Now it's worth a lot. So they had to be persistent too. But we decided, we will be the less expensive product. So there were other products out there that we were competing against that were, if we were $800, they were $1,500. And we say, and you don't have to use as much of us. So you can, use us, apply it every 2 weeks instead of every week. Well, anyway, so the government came out with their brand new, exciting reimbursement system that had two levels, two buckets. So there's the high level and low level, and they'll reimburse anything that's sold over $900 for, $1,200, and anything under $900 for $400. That was very depressing.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do something
like a
good.
gut punch. Oh my gosh.
And so we ultimately, we hung in there, and fortunately, we had my business partner's contacts from his law firm. We went to our senators, especially Senator Mark Warner. We said, look, we're trying to do something good. And this literally puts us out of business. And we're trying to do something good. He's like, yeah, that's not right. So the Medicare and Medicaid actually made an exception, like a huge exception for us. And they said, you know what, we'll pay you like the high bucket because you deserve to be. I mean, you're in that position for the next 2 years till we change the law again, till we change it. So, but it cost us a couple $1 million because we continued to we honored all of our contracts. We honored all of our sales team. Everyone got paid. Any product that was purchased, it was just as if they got reimbursed. So it was expensive, but we just had to raise a lot of money. So.
Yeah, that is honestly so crazy. So what would be the three big lessons that you learned from all that? Let's wrap up with that.
So I think, I know dentists are incredibly inventive. Mm-hmm. I talk to dentists all the time and they have ideas that are crazy smart and really great ideas. But, getting a patent is not that valuable. You need it. You absolutely have to have it because no one's going to invest if they think someone else, unless you've got a way to keep a trade secret, really secret.
Right. Which
is hard when you're selling it and people can reverse engineer it. So, that's the first thing I'd say, because so many people are like, oh man, you got a patent, you're rich. That's just starting. That's just going to cost you more money. The second thing I'd say is really understand your market. who's going to buy this and how's it going to get paid for? Because that's not always clear, So when I initially got into it, I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And, people are going to buy this. Yeah, but how many? And when you look at the cost of manufacturing, and especially on the dental model, is a three-dimensional model, a three-dimensional mold. I learned a lot about manufacturing, which is really expensive, where for wound care, I could create a flat sheet, like a huge flat sheet, and cut it up. And for the price of one dental thing that would get paid, maybe someone would pay $6 once in a while.
Right.
And I could get hundreds of dollars out of one flat sheet. So really to understand your market. And the other thing to understand is if you're, at some point your investors want to be made whole. And it's a tough road. It's constantly raising money, constantly, keeping them informed and understanding. But companies that they buy, whether it's a dental practice or whether it's a wound care, medical device company, whatever, they buy revenue. They buy, like, what are you earning? What are you able to achieve? What's your curve? And then they'll map it out a little bit. So maybe you'll get 2 or 3 times your revenue. So that's the other thing, is like, you need to have a market. You need to find your people. You need to have a market. You need to find your people who are going to buy it. They need to buy it. And if you want to sell it, you need to say, here's my market. Mm-hmm. And if it's a big company, they want $1 billion market. so that's how they're going to value it.
That's amazing. That's really insightful, because we all run across lots of people who are like, oh, I have this great idea and it's going to make me millions of dollars. And the truth is, 20 years later, there's all this money that was sunk into it before it could ever come back out. And most people don't have the resilience to get through that. They may not have the finances. They may not have the mentorship around them to help them to do it. So yours is definitely a tale of resilience. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Is there anything you want to add before we head out?
There's a podcast I love. I don't know if you ever listened to it. It's called How I Built This. And it's hosted by Guy Levy. Have you heard that?
I haven't, actually.
Oh my gosh. It's if anyone's interested in the entrepreneurial side, he's a great interviewer. It's an NPR podcast. He's just such a good interviewer, and the stories are amazing. Most of them come out successful. But because unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurial acts, when you take these big swings, they don't work out so well. But it's a great podcast. But I'd encourage anyone to listen to that, because it really, hearing people, it's not just the investment of time, energy, and money, but it's the whole psychology. Like, you need to get along with people. You need to have relationships with people. And that's really, really can make a difference.
Amazing. Well, if someone is trying to go on this path similar to you, would they be able to reach out to you and have a conversation? Because it sounds like, we know from 20 years of experience of doing this, you have a wealth of knowledge to share. Would you be willing to talk to people about that?
Absolutely. And people can reach out to me on my cell phone or text me 757-880-3007. You can post that if you want to. I'm always happy to talk to someone.
Wonderful. Well, the authenticity of your journey, you built a brand that kind of turned out differently than you probably anticipated from the beginning. We know that. But it has been an absolute pleasure hearing your story, hearing the lessons from it. So I really appreciate your honesty in sharing your entrepreneurial journey with us today.
Always great to talk, Angela, and I look forward to keeping in touch, and maybe we can connect again on your podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some other stories in there that we want to go down the rabbit hole on. So
oh my gosh.
You'll be back. Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy your day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.